True friendship in the era of Facebook, lessons from Ruth. And this is a subject that I've never taught. Oh, we'll see how it goes. But it's something I've always wanted to teach because I feel, and you might relate, that the concept of friendship has really gotten watered down, especially in the social media era that we're in. You ask somebody, how many friends do you have? Oh, 400, 550, 1,000, really? Well, how many of those, how many followers on Instagram do you have? 100,000? Well, how many true friends do you have? What does it mean to be a real friend? Not the friend who, when it's someone's birthday on Facebook, you write, happy birthday, and then forget about them for the rest of the year. That's not the friendship we're talking about. True and lasting and heartfelt friendship, like the friendship that we're going to see in just a moment, is so clear, is so evident in that beautiful relationship between Ruth and Naomi. But I want to speak big picture too about friendship in Judaism in a very, very broad sense. What does our tradition say about how you can be a friend? And I'd like for you to think for a moment. Just think to yourselves, if you're home, think to yourself, how many true friends do you have? Really? Who are those 3 or 4, maybe 2, if you're lucky, maybe 5 people who you really consider to be a friend for life, a friend no matter what? I see people who are here with their spouses, with their partners. Husbands, you better answer correctly here. But how many? And what are some of the qualities that go into that relationship, that go into that dynamic, that make it a true friendship and not a shallow one, not a Facebook friendship? And just to give you a sense of kind of how many different ways there are to talk about friendship in the modern world, you'll see the first source, which I absolutely love, comes from a novel, which I'll confess, I'm on the beam, I have to be honest, I haven't read, but it captures this idea, I think, so in such a humorous and really poignant way. How many varieties of friends are there? Everybody with me? Yeah. All right, I'll try to do this here. There are the friends you do like but never bother to see. There are the ones you really like a lot but you can't stand their partner. There are those who you just have out of habit and you can't shake them off. Then there's the ones you're friends with, not because you like them, but because they're very good looking or popular, and maybe it's kind of cool to be their friends. Then there are the friends of convenience. They're usually work friends. There are pity friends who you stay with because you feel sorry for them. There are acquaintances who are on probation as friends. There are, enough, fine, he interrupts her. You could go on and on with that list. There are a lot of types of friends. But again, what does Torah say? What does Talmud say? What does Ruth teach us about being not a friend like any of those, but a real friend, a true friend? And here's why I really wanted to teach this tonight, and you'll see the connection in a moment. Look at source number 2 from the Talmud in Ketubot. What is the subject matter of the Talmud in Ketubot? What is a ketubah? Marriage. Anyone been to any weddings? I guess not in the last year and a half, but maybe you can remember from a world long ago, there was this thing called a wedding where people would come together and they would sing and dance. We actually had one a month before COVID. And under the chuppah, this is what is sung. I'm sure you recognize it. Asher barasasam v'simcha chatan v'chala. Asher barasasam v'simcha chatan v'chala. And then we list, types of relationships that a couple should basically be modeled after, and expressions of joy. Gila, Rina, Ditza, Chedva, right, with gladness and merriment and song and dance and delight. And what is the very last word in that? Shalom ve'reut. What is reut, really? When we talk about a married couple, we talk about them as re'im ahuvim, friends who share love. Re'ut is a very special type of friendship. It's a friendship that is founded on a deeper love. It's not any of those types of friendship that we read about just a moment ago. I'll be popular if I'm with you. I just have no one else to talk to at work, so you're my friend. I just, want more followers on Facebook, so you'll be added onto. No. It's a deep friendship founded by love, founded on a foundation of love. And here's the kicker. Whose name, this is the $1 million question, everybody. Whose name do you hear when you hear that word re'ut?
Ruth.
I'll give you a hint. We've been talking about her for the last hour and a half. Ruth. Re'ut. Many scholars trace, as they look back into the origin of that name, Ruth, some connection to this concept of re'ut, of loving friendship. And so when we look into Ruth, which we're going to look into in just a moment, you see, it's not just the dynamics of the story, it's not just the narrative that presents a model of true friendship. Actually, it's her name. And we know in Torah, Kishmo ken hu. As a person is, so is their name. And if her name is loving friendship, well, I have news for you. That's who she is. That's what she models. We're going to see it in a moment, but I want to show you, before we do, a little bit of background on that word, re'ut, re'im ahuvim. You see in the Hebrew, for those who are familiar with Hebrew, resh ayin. Pay attention to that resh ayin, because there are many different words in Torah literature that can be connected with the concept of friendship. We're going to see another one in a little bit, but this is the biggie. Resh and ayin. This is the biggie. Where does it come up in Torah? In two of the biggest moments in all of Torah. So look with me, because it's going to teach us something about friendship here. First, Leviticus 19:18. If there is any one verse to point to as the most important verse in Torah, you could put a bet that this will be up there. What does it say? You probably have heard it before. Lo tikom velo titor, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge. What should you do instead? Ve'ahavta l're'echa kamocha. You shall love your fellow as yourself. And that word is typically translated as fellow. But you see that resh ayin there? It takes us back. You shall love your friend as yourself. And we know that this verse, at least as it's read in larger rabbinic literature, it's not taken to mean that you should only love Jews, that you should only love the members of your TBT community. It's taken to mean, can you walk down the street with an openness and a disposition of friendliness? It says in Pirkei Avot, this is probably my favorite quote in all of Pirkei Avot, greet everyone with a pleasant countenance. Can you, and it's hard. You've been in line at Stop and Shop? It's hard. You drive down some of these streets and people are cutting you off? Okay, not them. But everyone else. Can you know what it means to go through this world, greeting people in that pleasant way and seeing the people you meet not as an adversary, not as an obstacle in your life, but as a potential friend? As a potential friend. Re'echa, your fellow, but can you have some of that love for someone who you're just meeting? This is a beautiful and expansive vision for friendship. A tip that I have, and I really have been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm not sure I wanted to share it, but I will. If you see someone who's really bugging you in life, really getting on your nerves, can you think of them as a baby? As an innocent and sweet child who grew up and maybe somewhere along the way went down the wrong path, or the wrong word was said to them that made them a little bitter or a little bit difficult. Can you just have that openness and that empathy to be able to say, well, I can find some point within you that I can love, that I can befriend. Okay, I'll leave it there. I see some heads shaking. No. All right, fair enough. Guys, this is idealistic, maybe, but you know what? The Torah presents ideals sometimes, in addition to presenting what's real. Last thing I'll say about this verse and the concept of friendship is the very last word in that phrase, which always gets missed. You shall love your friend, your fellow, kamocha, as yourself. Don't forget that as yourself. Why? Because I think when it comes to having true friendship, when it comes to really knowing what it means to be a friend, you have to have some boundaries too. You have to love yourself a little bit too. And if that friend is doing things that are harming you in some sense, are putting you on a path that you shouldn't be on, if that friend is asking maybe too much of you, you have to be able to be honest and know, well, I'm loving you right now, but I'm not loving myself right now. And there's a dance. First thing I wanted to say about that word, and let's turn the page. The other great example of it. Exodus 33. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe panim el panim. How did God speak to Moshe? Face to face, and look at the word that's going to pop up here. Ka'asher yedaber ish, as a person would speak to re'ehu, a friend. That there is an element of the divine introduced in this larger concept of friendship. And that, to be a true friend, and it's based on, and it maybe comes after that previous verse that I shared with you, is to be able to see something divine within the person you're talking to, within the person you're befriending. Can you see what is godly about them? And you hope that they can see what's godly about you too. And that's something you have to be able to look for. But again and again, Judaism tells us, if we're going to take seriously this idea that we're created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, that you look into someone's face and somewhere there you should be able to feel God's presence, well, it's not just a theory. You should try. You should try. And the last thing I want to say about that, which is very interesting, a little bit of an aside, but still, who is the greatest friend you might ever have, based on this verse? If Moshe can talk to God as a friend, can you? Have you ever tried? It's interesting. We open up this prayer book and we think that our prayers are just reading through these words, and sometimes, most of the time, we read through them like maybe it's a newspaper or a resume or bullet points. We go quickly. We don't always feel them. But many of our sages, and in the Hasidic tradition especially, they urge us, try to speak to God in the language that moves your heart as a friend, as a best friend. Can you, in those moments of deepest prayer and truest prayer, close your eyes and say, God, here's what's going on with me. Pour out your heart to a friend. This concept, and Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, for anyone who's following along, maybe you've heard this name. He's not as obscure, I don't think, anymore. People really study him very deeply. One of the great Hasidic masters. That was his line. He said, Hit bodedut, you should find time to just sit alone and speak to God as if God were your friend. And if you don't have anything to say, how do you start the conversation? Right? I haven't prayed from the heart recently. I don't know what to say to you, God. You're the master of the universe. Who am I? We'll start there. That can be the start to your prayer. God, you're my friend. I don't know what else to say, but I want to feel connected. I want to pray. Okay, enough on that. We're going to look very quickly at some of the rabbinic sources, the rabbinic view of friendship, and then I promise we will get to Ruth, and we'll end with her. Okay, everyone's still with me, right? All right, I wish we could serve you coffee, but we'll have to keep the energy up. Pirkei Avot. This is probably the first place you would go if you want to understand how the rabbis, not the Torah itself, not the Bible, the rabbis viewed friendship, says something fascinating. They said, Oseh lecha rav, make a teacher for yourself. And how should you relate to a friend? Ukne lecha haver. And acquire yourself for yourself a friend. What is koneh? Any the Hebrew speakers in the crowd? Ani koneh? I'm buying something. Acquire? You're supposed to buy a friend? What the heck were the rabbis talking about there? All right, I'll explain in a moment. Here's Rambam, one of the great Jewish philosophers, on what that means. Acquire for yourself a friend. Not just have friends, not just make friends, not just go sit in a deli and if you meet someone and you schmooze, they're your friend. No, acquire. Here's what he said. He said that it's with an expression of acquisition, not make for yourself a friend, as I mentioned, or befriend others. The intention, this is the Rambam, is that a person must acquire a friend for himself so that all of his deeds and all of his matters be refined through that person. You have to go out and do anything it takes to find someone in this world who's going to make you a better person, and that's your friend. In the rabbinic view, it's not, as I mentioned before, this purely loving, purely open relationship. There's a utility to it. I want the friends that are going to make me better. And if you're not going to make me a better person, I don't need you as a friend. And the concept here is a chavruta. A chavruta. What is a chavruta? Two friends, chaverim, the exact same word, right? A chavura, a group of friends. So a chavruta, two friends. What do they do all day when chavruta are sitting across from each other in the yeshiva? What are they busy with? Studying and telling each other, oh, I want to be better at this mitzvah. I want to be better at that mitzvah. Oh, I messed up this. Oh, you messed up that. They're working together to improve one another. The rabbis think of it as kind of sharpening a blade. I sharpen you, you sharpen me. And there's a utility there. And acquire a friend means you have to go out of your way to find someone in this world who can do that for you. Maybe you have someone. And I know people are here with their spouses, with their partners. That's that kind of friend. That's re'im ahuvim, a friend that ideally pushes you to be better, always. And when you mess up, they're not afraid to tell you. They're really not afraid to tell you. And that's good, and that's what you want. When the rabbis thought of friendship, they thought of it in this utilitarian way. I'm not saying that's the best way, I'm not saying it's the worst way, but that's how they thought of it. And if you look at the verse from Proverbs that's next, you see the opposite of that fact. Make no friendship, it says. Al titra, and here's that root that we're more familiar with, resh ayin, as it applies to friendship. Do not make friendship with a person that is given to anger. Why? You spend all day with someone who's angry. How are you going to end? How are you going to end up? How are you going to leave that situation? What's going to happen when you go home? You better believe you're going to take on some of that energy. And so the rabbis really caution us. They say, acquire a friend if you have to. Spend money if you have to. Do whatever it takes to find someone in this world who's going to lift you up, and do whatever you have to do to stay distant. Not even socially distant. I'm not talking 6 feet. I'm talking 1,000 feet away from somebody who's going to pull you down, who's going to make you leave that situation angry or bitter or confused or doubting or depressed, or whatever it is. For the rabbis, friendship is this utilitarian give and take. But, and here's where we're going to end the class for tonight and say Laila Tov and Chag Sameach, in Ruth, the model's a little different. The model's a little different. Why? Because as Kaylee and as Cantor Chesler already taught in so many beautiful ways, the situation there was a tough one. It was a tough one. Did Ruth get anything from being friends with Naomi? Was there any utility? Well, we can think about it. Maybe. But on a deeper level too, I think this story presents us with a model that goes past what the rabbis imagined, in that what they had was a deeper love, was a connection, was a friendship that wasn't just about, I get this from you, you get this from me. But we're going to share a journey here. You've been through a lot of pain. I've been through a lot of pain. And even though you're much older than me and from a different culture entirely, and on paper we couldn't be any more different, still, true friendship emerges. Because of that shared story, do you have any friends, and think to yourself, who you don't get anything from necessarily, and they don't get anything from you necessarily? There isn't that utility. It's just a person who you've shared your story with, who you've been on this wild journey of life with as a loving companion. A loving companion in that spiritual sense. If you haven't, I hope you can find someone like that who's not just your spouse, because we need that to get through this world. One thing I didn't mention from the rabbinic source, as we then look toward Ruth and conclude, look back at the Rambam for a second. Look back at Maimonides there. What are the last three words? Challenging. They're in Aramaic. Anybody here proficient in Aramaic? Want to give it a stab? Give it a try? Chavruta o metuta. Anybody heard that expression before? It's a very famous rabbinic expression. Chavruta o metuta means either friendship or death. Whoa. That's kind of scary. Like, if you don't have the right kind of friends, you die? No. They're not saying that. But what they're saying is, if you try to go through this world without true friends, without the kind of friends who will really be there with you on this journey without expecting anything in return, it's like you never truly lived. You've missed something very essential about what it means to be a human being in this life, in this world. You missed it. We should all be blessed to have it. Okay, back to the sources as we start to wrap up. Look at what Ruth says. Now I'm on the last page. And we read through these verses already, a lot of them when Kaylee spoke, when Cantor spoke. I want to just show you, hone in on one word in that moment when Ruth and Naomi are discussing what's going to happen next. Everyone with me? Still on the very last page now. They broke into weeping again, right? Orpah, we know what happened to her. She's out of there. I don't need this. I have my own coping mechanisms, I guess, as Kaylee put it. But what does Ruth do? And here's the Hebrew word that really gives us a deep insight into their friendship. Davka ba. What is davka? Anyone know that Hebrew root, daled, bet, kuf? Anybody? Devekut. What does it mean in the back?
Stick together.
Yeah, how do you say glue in modern Hebrew? Yeah, devek. You're glued together. You're stuck together. You're in this relationship through life where no matter what happens, I'll be there for you. And you'll be there for me. And I know, Ruth says, I'm not going to get anything out of this. Because what did Naomi say? I don't have any sons for you now. You have no reason to be my friend. Orpah says, okay, I don't. Ruth says, I'm sticking with you. I feel a kinship to you that's deeper than what I can gain from you. And that's deeper than what you can gain from me. And that, I think, is pointing us to what is true and lasting and even deeper about their friendship than what the rabbis imagined. That model where it's, what can you help me to attain? How can you help me to be better? This is more than that. This is a loving relationship between friends. Now look with me at the last sources. Again from Pirkei Avot. We learn something that really is a model, I think, for how to be a friend and just how to be a human being in this world. This is a quote to take home and put on your mirror. Kol ahava, we're in Pirkei Avot 5:16 now, those who are following along at home. Kol ahava shehi taluya b'davar. Any love that depends on something, I love you because of X. I'm going to get this. I'm going to feel this way. I'm going to grow in this way. Any love that depends, how does that love end? Batel davar. At the end of the day, that thing that you try to attain through that person will go away, and therefore, batela ahava. So will the love. When that thing that you're trying to get from them is no longer there, friendship over. I have no use for you now. Why should I be your friend? And the opposite is true too. She'ena teluya b'davar, any love that is not contingent. That's Ruth and Naomi. I'm just there with you. There's no reason necessarily. I just want to journey with you as a partner through this world. Eina batela le'olam. It lasts forever. Do you have a friend who you know you've been with maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years, maybe 50 or 60 years? There's something about that friendship that you know will last forever. And you might have fights and you might have conflicts and things might come up. You might go a year without speaking to each other, but you know when you think about that person, there's something deep there that's holding you together like Ruth and Naomi that just lasts. That just lasts, and God willing will continue to. That's what we're talking about here, that gift of true friendship. Last thing I want to say is from the Talmud again. It's a quote to leave you with tonight. It says like this, Rabbi Hanina, I have learned much from my teachers, he says, but even more from who? From my friends. Now, what does it mean that I've learned a lot from teachers, but I've learned ultimately more from my friends? Well, think about those two relationships for a second. Teacher is someone who I acquire to get something from. I want you in my life because you'll help me achieve in this way. I can write on my resume that you were my teacher and you teach me these skills, and therefore I see you as a friend, but as a mentor, really. But a true friend that has that give and take. I give to you, you give to me, and ultimately that love is not dependent on anything at all. It's just a true and shared friendship. You learn more about how to be a person and a mensch in the deepest sense from that than you will from any teacher, even learning with the greatest professor from Harvard, from Oxford, from Yale, whatever it is. That friend will teach you how to be a real person. So, my friends, I hope that this was a little bit of a window into the concept of friendship, a fun thing to teach. I'm going to have to keep this source sheet through the lens of Ruth and Naomi, and what I will say is this, it's been a week of making new friends, for me personally, for Kaylee and I as a couple, and we're just so overjoyed to continue to deepen the friendships that now that these seeds have been planted with all of you, and I hope that they will be, as our Torah tells us, really deep and lasting and beautiful and filled with learning and love and celebrating together and only good things. So thank you all for being a part of this session tonight, for really the entire full evening of learning. Kaylee Yasher Koach, Cantor, a big Yasher Koach, and to those who followed along at home, we have a lot more to come. Tomorrow morning, you want to know what the 10 Commandments are all about? Come to shul. We have cheesecake. And that's not the reason you should come, but it helps. So before I forget, those who are here, we have a lot of cheesecake. So we're going to be able to give out some if you'd like to take home. Again, come to shul tomorrow morning. We have plenty of space, so much space you can sit 50 feet away from anyone and still have a beautiful service. And then Tuesday morning, Yizkor, of course, we'll be reading the book of Ruth and so much more. Chag Sameach, everybody. A great start to the holiday.